Hello guys, welcome back. Today I'm going to explain to you what are getters and setter methods in Java. So let's look at it with an example. So as you can see on my screen, I have created two classes. One is called main class, which we will use to execute some of our code example. And I will also print stuff on the screen so you can see what is actually happening. And I have created another class called employee, which would be basically a container which holds some value, and we will use it for an example. So let's ask ourselves this question, that why do we need getters and setters method in the first place? Most of the people know that getter and setter method is basically generically used in Java and other common programming languages. Setter method allows you to set some value to the variable, and getter allows you to get that variable value back when you need it. But I don't think everyone clearly understands the usage of getters and setters and why they must use it as an abstraction layer. So let me start with a common error that people do, and then I will take you into little detail why do we need to have that abstraction in the first place. So let's look at our employee class first. So the employee class is basically nothing but a container that holds information about one particular employee. So I made all the variable public and static because I do want these variable be accessible from outside this class, and static, so then they don't have to create object, they can just directly access these variables. And I've created a string name, last name, age, weight, full name of the employee, and the pay, which is the salary of the employee basically. What our main class does is basically lets you set some value using those variables. So employee class, because all the variables are static, we can just directly call employee class, and then all the variables are available to us. So I would set name as a Sam, last name Shah, full name is Sam plus Shah, or you can call the variable and arrange it this way, which is same thing. I'll set age to be 50, weight is 70, and pay is 100k. And I'm now going to print out those variables, so I know what I've set is actually being set. So let's run this, and as you can see, it is setting every value that I was hoping for. So there you go, our class works, our variables are static, and it seems to be doing everything we expect. So if this is the right way to write things, then why do we need getters and setters? I mean, we can access those variable, we can easily set and get values of variable. Then what's the big noise about getters and setters? So now let me explain what can go wrong long term, and then you will understand what I'm trying to convey here. So let's start with an example of a real life problem. So if you are an API writer, so example, you are writing this employee class for many different users. So basically you will be writing this class, but there are other users of your company or maybe third party guys going to be using your class to store the value. And that means once your API is published and already in use out there, you can't easily change it. If you keep doing that, people will stop using your API and they will hate you forever, because every time you touch your code, they have to touch their code, and they could have spent a long time developing it. So it's not practical basically. So once your code is used by many people, you have to preserve the interface, you have to preserve the variable names, you have to preserve everything that was working and make it backward compatible in most cases, right? So now in this sort of development world, now once you publish your own API, you are pretty much stuck. And how do you protect yourself around that? So if you want to do minimal change or minimal improvement, you can't do it now, because once your variable is being used outside the world, you can't touch them. So what do I mean by that? So example, in the main class here, I'm using the string name directly. I'm using this variable called npay. Let's say my boss comes and say, man, npay does not make sense. Can you please change it to salary? So here you go. If I go and change this to salary, anyone using my variable would have an error, because they hard coded my variable name into their code and they called it npay. You pretty much annoyed them. Now they also have to go and update their code wherever this npay is used. Even in my simple example, you can see I have two lines to fix. So imagine someone's complex code where they have used your variable hundreds of times. This is not gonna fly for them. So how do we protect ourselves from that kind of things? So here where the abstraction of getters and setters comes very handy. So let me show you how getters and setters are made in the first place. So if you right click, so if you're using Eclipse, just right click on the variable, go to source, and then select generate getters and setters. Now you can do all these exercise manually, but I would suggest to use already made functions, because then it preserves the naming convention and everything. Now it presents you all the variables which could have getters and setters. So in my case, I would like to select all of them. If you only want get or set or both, you can go and choose them accordingly. In my case, I want getters and setters for each variable, so I'll keep it as default. I would like to insert my getters and setters after last member, so it doesn't end up in between some variables, and I would like to have both public, right? So if I click OK now, you will see that now we have getters and setter methods for each of the variable. So basically set methods takes this argument type, which is exactly same as the variable type, and it sets to that variable. And same with the get method returns the variable value, uh, which is the same type as how we set it. So now that we have all the getters and setters method, what is the important step? So the important step is make all these variable private, because if you don't make them private, the main class would still have access to those variable, and then people would not actually use getters and setter. They might still use the variable name directly, and then it doesn't solve the purpose. So there you go. Now if I make them private, you will see the whole main class is showing me error, because they are saying no, I can't access these variables. So let me fix these. So the way you set now is by saying employee.set name rather than directly calling that variable, and you can still set the same information. So in this case it will be name. Let me just quickly copy paste a few times. So here it will be last name, and in my case it is Shah, and here it will be full name, which will be Shah. What else is there? We want to set their age, so let's call it 30, and set their weight, call it 70, and set their salary pay, in our case call it 100,000, and we don't need these anymore. So we are setting all these information, and now to get those information you use getter method. So here it will be get name, get last name, get full name, get age, get weight, and get pay. And if I execute this code, you can see it's still doing exactly what it used to do. The only difference is now we are not directly accessing the variable, we are actually using getters and setter method abstraction. Now, so what's the advantage? I mean, we did all this extra exercise and now we have more methods to deal with. What advantage does it give us? So the advantage is here that, let's say if your boss now says please change this pay to salary, you can just right click, say refactor, rename, and these becomes an salary now. But you are only changing the variable name, but if you look at the method that was originally created, set pay and get pay, it's still same. That means anyone who is using these methods, they will still have access to the original methods. You are not breaking their code, but you can still fix the internal bugs or tidy a few things if you have to. If your database is looking for name, colon, salary, then you can map to that. without impacting the interface which is already been published. So that's the most important part, that getters and setters method allows you to preserve this interface and you can still do changes under the hood, right? Now what are the other benefits? So let's say, so you guys know that salary is a sensitive information, right? You don't want everyone to be able to change or get everyone's salary. So how can you change that if your boss says no salary, we have done mistake now and we want that salary to be only controlled by only few people in admin? Now we have to add some sort of password protection around that. But if you have allowed access to this variable in the first place, now you're stuck because everyone have access to this variable directly, and that means you can't protect that unless you do a big code change and hide it under the hood. So if you would have used getters and setters instead, you can easily add another processing on top of it. So let me find the getters and setters for salary, which is get pay and set pay basically in our case. And we can say, look, before anyone can set someone's salary, we must do the password check. And what does it do basically? So password check function will return boolean true or false. If password is valid, it will be true. So I'm not going to write the whole logic for password check, but let's say it's returning boolean, and then I'm just going to return true for now, saying all passwords are valid. But you can have some complex logic to check the password. And once password is true, then only allow people to set salary, right? So if password is true, then set salary, otherwise ignore it. And same you can do get, because you don't want anyone to be able to get everyone's salary. So again, you can do if password equals true, then only allow them to have access to the salary of employee. And if that is there, then return that, otherwise you return null basically, or return 0, right? Error. So error -1, right? So there you go. Getters and setters basically creates abstraction layer for you that you can actually then apply your processing power to variable. You can change variable names at your comfort. You don't have to break an interface, and you are not allowing direct access to variable, which is in some time can be a bit dangerous because people can ad hoc change variable, and then yeah, it just becomes quite messy later on. So hopefully these examples are helping you with how these getters and setter method works. It is very important that whenever you create any variable, you do not let people have access to those variables directly. Always allow them to have access only via getters and setters. Plus getter and setter, because it's a standard mechanism, if I'm dealing with any complex API, I mean, my first approach is I type get and say control space and see how many different things I can get or set, because sometimes remembering variable names are also not practical. So if you just have get and set, I know that easily that, oh, I can have access to these many things. Same with a set method. So if I just control space after set, I can see how many things I can set. So I don't have to then remember each name, like string name, because I call it string name. You might be calling it just name. Someone else calls it full name. I don't know. Because it's a human construction, you don't want to have people remember all these variables. So set and get method is very helpful in that way as well. So hopefully I've explained enough that why getters and setters abstractions are needed. Let me know if you still don't understand it. I will try and give more examples. But for now, that's about it. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.